Scouts 122 X-ray, turn right at Alpha 6, contact now. Scouts 4473, Salt Lake Tower, wind 320 at 8, traffic pulling in position, runway 34 left, clear to land. Southwest 376, RNAV to Sappy, runway 34 left, clear for takeoff.
Tower 7393, roger, maintain 250 knots, airport north 29 miles, report to both sites. Maintain 250, airport to site, Scout 7393. Scout 7393, clear visual approach, runway 34 right.
Southwest 376, contact departure.
First departure, South 376.
Scouts 4473, right at Alpha 7, join Bravo, then contact ground. Delta 1457, Salt Lake Tower, runway 34 left, line up and wait traffic, a regional jet turning a 4-mile final. Delta 1457, wind 320 at 8, RNAV to Shoals, runway 34 left, clear for takeoff. Frontier 584, contact Tower 119.05. Scouts 4647, Salt Lake Tower, caution wake turbulence, departing point 757, wind 340 at 7, runway 34 left, clear to land.
4825, contact, course.
To departure, Scouts 4825.
Hi, my name is Kyle Sanders. I'm an S3 mentor with the Salt Lake RTEC, and today I'm going to be taking you through the Salt Lake RTEC official 20 July 2013 alias file update. By the time you watch this video, some things may have changed, may have not, but really what I'm going to be teaching you today is how to edit the file, how to read the file, and make it work for you. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, hopefully you've already done with your initial controller setup, go to the Salt Lake ZLC RTEC.com website, go to the download section, alias file, and you're going to have to click on the alias file a couple times and then download and download again. Alright, so you want to select it to be saved to your computer. If you're running 1.2.3 of VRC or earlier, you are able to select where your main VRC file is. Mine is on my desktop. If you're running 1.2.4 or higher, my understanding is that it's being put into your documents folder. Regardless of where your VRC file is, I suggest making a folder called ZLC, and then within ZLC you're going to want to make subfolders, alias, sector file, and POF. Save this file in your alias file. Now I've already done this, so I'm going to just cancel this. When it saves, it's going to be saved as a zip file. You're going to want to unzip that file and then delete the zip file. You should be left now with ZLC_alias, then whatever date that it has been released. Again, in this case it's 20 July 2013. Let's go ahead and double click and open this. A text file isn't the most elegant thing to look at. I've tried to make this as clear as possible by providing proper spacing and structure to this file. What I suggest is maximizing this window. Here at the top you'll see the name of the file, the last time it was revised, its status, as this one is final, it's no longer in alpha or beta phase, and the authors of this file. Currently it's me, Kyle Sanders, and the current training administrator for Salt Lake, Danny Flaherty. The first section you're going to come to is the table of contents. This shows you pretty much the structure of this entire alias file, which is quite long. And the first section you're going to come to is notes. I'm not really going to go through all these, but I will emphasize a few key notes. One, I do suggest that you maximize this document to your screen so it's easier to read. If you want, you can hit the format word wrap. What this does is it takes all the information that was previously going off to the right side of your screen, in which you would have to scroll to see, and then just wraps it around to where it's a left to right fashion, top to bottom. Also, it is strongly suggested that the controller keeps this file open in the background while controlling, so that they may use the Control F find feature so that they can quickly take care of the aircraft. An example of this is, say that we're looking for the visual approach. I'm going to hold down Control and then hit F at the same time. I'm going to say visual approach, and then I'm going to hit find. It automatically takes me to the very first visual approach that it finds in the document, and then if I hit find next, it'll find the very next one. I can continue to hit next until it's either complete or I find exactly what I'm looking for. Let's scroll back up. I also provide a link in which you may research on your own to find more information about the coding of alias files. There's a lot of variables in here and a lot of different codes that work under certain situations. It would help the user to understand what these codes are and how to use them. Let's move on to the legend. Within this document I have labeled the large categories with these symbols, subsections within the categories with dashes, and then the variations of those subcategories with asterisks. Alright, once we're in VRC, we're going to go to Settings, General, Alias File, and we're going to find that alias file. Select it and hit open. Hit apply and OK. The next section is the initial logon. This is not position specific and is just common aliases that will be used on initial logon. So let's study the very first one here. .s is the alias command. The alias command will always come first. Then you will have a space, regular wordage, and then some kind of weird looking code with a dollar symbol afterwards. I'm going to teach you about this. As you can see, we have Delta 1171 selected. I'm going to edit his flight plan. I'm going to assign him a squawk code of 0501. If I wanted him to squawk a certain code, all I have to do is assign that squawk code to him, come down to the command line while he is selected, hit .s, and then enter. The program is automatically going to tell Delta 1171 squawk and then the squawk code. As you can see, all I typed was the .s. Afterwards, it automatically types squawk for me. The dollar symbol in this dollar symbol squawk code means that it's going to pull information from an outside source. What I mean by an outside source is something that is not within the command line. If we go back up to our notes section and we find that link that I told you about earlier, copy it, and let's go to that website. We can scroll down and see a whole bunch of these weird codes. It then tells you what those codes do. In our case is the dollar symbol squawk code. What that means is it's going to take the information from the squawk section of his flight plan and insert it right after the squawk. So in this instance, instead of saying dollar symbol squawk in the command line, it inserted 0501. It's going to do the same thing with this command alias. The alias command is going to be .rsq. This stands for reset transponder, comma, squawk, and then it's going to insert the squawk code assigned. So let's try that. .rsq. All I have to do is hit enter, and it tells Delta 1171 reset transponder, squawk 0501. An alias command does not always have to have a specific code. The alias command in this instance is .sqn for squawk normal. All we're going to do is say .sqn and hit enter, and it's going to tell the pilot Delta 1171 squawk normal. It didn't have to pull any information from any other outside source for this command. You can set a command to say whatever you want. Alright, so we're going to move down just a little bit. This one, the dollar symbol dist, this stands for distance. It's going to take the distance from that aircraft assigned and whatever we put in that space. I guess we should really talk about what this dollar symbol number 1 means. A dollar symbol number 1 means you're going to do the dot command, whatever that command may be, space 1, 2, 3, 4. The dollar symbol and then that number corresponds with the number of spaces after the command. So in this instance, I'm going to use the taxi to parking via. I happen to know that certain command, so I'm going to find it with a dot taxi to parking via, and there it is. So the command is TPV. It's going to then write taxi to parking via, and then we see that dollar symbol number 1 again. That dollar symbol number 1 means the first space after that command line. In this instance, we are going to say .tpv space kilo kilo 1, and then it's going to write it right there. TPV space kilo space kilo 2. Let's say kilo 2. Hit enter. It then says taxi to parking via kilo kilo 2. Let's look at the exit runway alias. The command is extpv, exit taxi to parking via. So this command is going to say welcome to whatever I put in the first space after the command, period, exit runway, comma, taxi to parking via, and then whatever I put in the second command space. So let's try that. Dot exit taxi to parking via. So it says welcome to KSLC space taxi to parking via kilo kilo 2. All I have to do is hit enter, and it inserts that information for me. Welcome to Salt Lake City, KSLC. Exit runway, taxi to parking via Kilo 2. It inserted all the information I needed right there. So let's go back to our original topic. The radar contact distance, then the $1 means the very first thing I put right after the main command. Miles, then the code $bear for bearing. It's going to take that same waypoint that I put right in the first space after the main command and give me the bearing of that aircraft from that waypoint then it's going to uppercase whatever I put in there. So now it's going to uppercase that waypoint that I put in there. It's then going to take the current altitude of that pilot at the time of writing that alias command. So let's figure it out. RCDB for radar contact distance bearing. And then all I have to do is put a space and a waypoint. I'm going to use the waypoint Euphemy. Radar contact distance bearing from Euphemy. All I have to do is hit enter. It's going to tell 1171 that it's radar contacted 15 miles south of Euphemy at 4,300 feet. How did it get that information? Radar contact, the distance from Euphemy, then it said miles, then the bearing from that waypoint south of, then it listed the waypoint and then uppercased it, and then it gave me the current altitude of that pilot. The elevation at Salt Lake City is 4,200 to 4,300 feet mean sea level, so it picked that pilot up as 4,300. Now that that's out of the way, there is a few key alias commands or short dot commands that are built in the VRC by itself. One being the .ff, find fix command. Let's say that I wanted to find the fix called Euphemy. I know it's around this area somewhere. There's a few things we could do. We can hit .find space and then what you're trying to find. In my case, it's Euphemy. Hit enter. It's going to highlight it there, but I still can't see it, and that yellow circle is actually going to disappear. And there it goes. What if I wanted it to stay there? Well, what we're going to have to do is make sure that in view, fix labels is turned on, but not fixes. I'm going to hit .ff Euphemy. Enter. And there it is. It pops right up. And that's going to stay there until you do that same command again. If that command is the last command you gave, all you have to do is hit the directional key up. Then hit enter again. And there it's gone. So what I've done here is I've taken a lot of the Salt Lake arrival gates. Arrival gates are where the stars, the procedural routes that come into Salt Lake, enter the TRACON. The TRACON is where approach and departure controls. Alright, so how do I get these arrival gates in here? They're already in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn them off and then I'm going to turn them back on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write the ZLC AG for Salt Lake City arrival gate command. As you can see, I put a space here, and then that'll write the .ff command for us. Afterwards, it's going to highlight all of these fixes. Alright, as we can see, they're gone. So all I have to do is say the ZLC AG command again and hit enter, and they all pop up for us. Alright, let's talk a little bit about craft clearances. In your controller training, you learned what craft means: clearance, route, altitude, frequency, and transponder. And this is the clearance that most of us are used to giving. If you read closely and you think logically, there's no real reason to give an altitude if the pilot filed a departure procedure, due to the fact that departure procedures are listed on the chart along with the initial altitude that pilot is supposed to climb to, and then expect the cruising altitude 10 minutes later. The pilot filed the cruising altitude, so there's no reason to actually repeat that information. So a basic clearance with a departure could sound something like: clear to Los Angeles via the Edith 1 departure, departure frequency with Salt Lake approach on 124.3, squawk 0502. There's no reason to tell them to maintain 10,000, expect flight level 320 10 minutes after departure. That information is already charted on the standard instrument departure chart. In this case, we're going to look at the craft section. For now it might not make sense, but just understand that M stands for with me. This is for radar controllers only. If radar controllers are giving a craft clearance to a pilot, these are the ones that they would use. U is for Unicom. If there's no controller above tower online, then departure is going to be with Unicom. Alright, the first variable is a pilot who filed a departure, and that departure has a transition. And here you can see my logic in it is craft T, that last T is for transition. So what we're going to do is going to type dot craft and then put a T at the end. This is going to tell the pilot cleared to, and then it's going to take the arrival airport code from his flight plan and insert it right there. It's going to say comma via the whatever we put in the first space departure, comma whatever we put in the second space transition, then is filed. Departure frequency with, it's then going to take the radio name of the controller ID code, in which I will describe here in just a moment, and place it into there. On, then it's going to give the frequency of that same controller code that I gave, and then it's going to tell the pilot to squawk the assigned squawk code. This might seem a little difficult right now, but bear with me. For Delta 1171, he filed the PCOP 2 departure with a Battle Mountain transition. So we're going to say dot craft, and it's a departure with a transition, so we're going to put a T. Space. We know that it's going to say cleared to Reno, KRNO, via the PCOP 2 departure, space, Battle Mountain transition, then is filed. What do we need now? We need to know the departure frequency. So let's go up to Tools and look at the controller list. In this example, I was unable to get someone to come onto Sweatbox and provide radar services above me. So in this case, I decided to make an ATIS, which is a frequency that has a frequency identifier, or controller ID. The controller ID for this frequency is SA. Sometimes you'll see it as just C, you'll see it as T1 for tower, you'll see it as G1 for ground. This is a quick way for us to identify that controller within alias commands. So for this example, and for this example only, we're going to assume that departure frequency is going to be with quote-unquote Salt Lake ATIS on frequency 124.75. So the controller ID for Salt Lake ATIS is SA. We already know that he's been cleared via the PCOP 2 departure, Battle Mountain transition, then is filed. Departure frequency with SA, and then he's going to squawk the assigned squawk code. We don't need to put that information in. So let's hit enter and see what this does. So what it says is Delta 1171 cleared to KRNO, which is the arrival airport, via the, what I put as the first space after the main command, which is PCOP 2 departure, what I put as the second space, which is BAM for Battle Mountain transition, then is filed. Departure frequency with KSLC underscore ATIS, which is the name of the frequency, on, then it gave the actual frequency 124.75, and it told him to squawk his assigned squawk code, which is 0501. There's a few variations of departures in which you should take a close look at. For example, if you're a radar controller given a delivery clearance, you don't have to put in the controller ID. It just says that departure frequency is with me, squawk, and then you're done. If you're a delivery, ground, or tower controller and there's no controller on above you to provide radar services or departure frequency is going to be with Unicom. So here, instead of asking for a controller code, it just says that departure with Unicom, and it lists 122.8. Another variation of departure is you can have a departure that requires vectoring, such as the Salt Lake 2 departure. It's a departure procedure, but then you're going to be vectored for your final transition. So here it would say that the aircraft is cleared to the destination via the Salt Lake 2 departure, for instance. Vectors to, let's say, Battle Mountain. then is filed. Departure frequency with, and everything else is exactly the same. Let's talk a little bit about the pre-departure clearance, PDCs. This is a relatively new technology, new feature that real-world airlines and airports are conducting. In order to facilitate clearances to pilots without congesting the clearance delivery frequency for all those aircraft, they have come up with a way to digitally send pretty much a text message or an email, if you will, to pilot, clearing them for their filed route. I have a few different variations of this PDC. The first one is with Unicom, but I don't want to talk about that one. I want to talk about the standard clearance. If departures online, all frequencies are being used, delivery, ground tower, so on and so forth. The pilot who usually wants a PDC is going to ask for it in his remarks section. So it might look like something like this. Alright, so we know that he wants a PDC. Alright, so we're going to start a private chat with this aircraft by typing the .chat command, then aircraft select key. At this time, we're going to type .pdc1 space SA. That SA is acting as our departure controller ID. Obviously, again, an ATIS would not be our departure controller. This is only for instructional purposes. Now we're just going to hit enter. It's going to send the pilot a private message saying pre-departure clearance start, call sign Delta 1171, beacon, which is squawk 0501, flight level 320, the departure location Salt Lake City, arrival location Reno, the equipment, which is a Boeing 737-800, the approved route, it'll list the entire route here, the departure frequency info 124.75, it pulled that from the ATIS here, altitude restrictions as published on the SID, SID information, RNAV departures are runway dependent and specifically marked RNAV, RNAV SID, confirm first RNAV fix with tower prior to departure. Additional information, ground will assign runway with taxi instructions. Contact appropriate ground control for taxi instructions with beacon code and call sign. This message serves as your pre-departure clearance. Do not reply to this message. Contact appropriate controller only if you have pertinent questions regarding your clearance. Pre-departure clearance end. At this time, Delta 1171 can plug in 0501 into his squawk, push and start at his own discretion, hold short of the nearest taxiway, and then call ground with his call sign. It'll sound something like this. Salt Lake ground, Delta 1171, beacon squawk code 0501, request taxi. At that time, he'll get taxi instructions. He'll get to tower right before he takes off. He filed the PCOP 2 departure. So say that he's going to runway 16 right. His first waypoint should be PIG. So at that time, tower is going to give him a clearance such as Delta 1171, RNAV to PIG, wind 020 at 5, runway 16 right, clear for takeoff. That pilot then has to read back the first waypoint, RNAV to PIG, got the winds, runway 16 right, clear for takeoff. If he doesn't confirm that first waypoint, then we have to cancel his takeoff clearance. It's a new regulation that the FAA put in November of 2012, I believe it was. Regardless of the date, it's a new regulation, and I'm not going to go too much further into it due to the fact that this video is not about regulations and rules of the operations around the airport, but it's more about teaching you about the alias. So there's our pre-departure clearances. There's a few different variables, like as if it's on Unicom, you're not going to have a departure controller. It's going to be with Unicom. If you're a radar controller giving a pre-departure clearance, you're going to want the departure frequency info to say this frequency. Moving on through the alias file, there's a lot of different codes in which you now know how to research and figure out what it means. One particular one I want to go back to is the readback correct for uncontrolled fields. This readback correct for uncontrolled fields section is for radar controllers only. Pilot request IFR clearance out of an uncontrolled field, a Class Echo, something like U42 South Valley. They get their clearance, they read it back, then you want to do the read back correct, release for departure ordeal. Well, I make this extremely easy. All you have to say is RBC R. That last R stands for release for departure. So let's say that one of our other controllers, one of our other pilots requested IFR clearance out of South Valley. You gave him his clearance and it's time to say read back correct. You want to give him the current time in Zulu and 30 minutes from now a void clearance time. You don't have to figure any of that out anymore. You just type RBC for read back correct, then R for release for departure. Hit enter. It tells the pilot read back correct, release for departure 0141 Zulu, which is the exact time right now. Clearance void if not off by 0211 Zulu, which is exactly 30 minutes from now. Monitor Unicom, frequency changed approved. Report this frequency airborne, see you soon. All the work's done for you. So let's say that the field is closed due to a prior departure. And let's say that the void clearance time is in 5 minutes. We're going to do the read back correct, H for hold for release, space, and the number of minutes you want him to give you a call back if not released already. So let's say in 5 minutes that field is supposed to be open again. So we just type the number 5 and hit enter. It tells the pilot read back correct, field is temporarily closed per 1 in 1 out rules. Hold for release information. Contact me at 0147 Zulu, which is exactly 5 minutes from now, if not yet released. Monitor this frequency. Let's scroll down to the collision alerts and low altitude alerts. As you can see, some of these can get pretty complicated, such as the collision alert. We're going to take the first one, collision alert, just .ca for the command. Alright, we're going to use 5 Alpha Victor and assume that he's airborne. What we're going to do is say .ca for collision alert, space. It'll say traffic alert, traffic 12 o'clock, 7 miles, southbound, a Boeing 747 space at 10,000 feet. Advise you turn right 20 degrees. All I have to do is hit enter. 5 Alpha Victor traffic alert, traffic 12 o'clock, 7 miles southbound, a Boeing 747 at 10,000 feet. Advise you turn right 20 degrees. Now there are a few shortcuts to this that I'd like to show you guys. For traffic point outs, all you have to do is select the aircraft you want to give the command to, hold down Control Shift, and select the other aircraft. Like for instance here I'm going to select the Eagle Flight 3778, and you'll see that it told him to give way to the CRJ 700 at your 5 o'clock. In this instance the aircraft are on the ground and the VRC program knows that. If the two aircraft were in the air, this command would have been the standard traffic advisory. Traffic is a Boeing 747, 3 miles southbound, report in sight, that whole ordeal. This is just a quick little feature that might be helpful some other time. Alright, for SIDS, an aircraft just departed Salt Lake, and this is the radar controller. There's two variations of most of these. There's the standard one, radar contact, climb via the Edith 1 departure. There's also the Edith 1D. D means delete speed restrictions, which is a popular command even in real world on initial contact. So let's go ahead and do this. You don't really need to do any interventions. All you have to do is look at the pilot's flight plan, figure out what departure they're on, and then type that departure. So let's go for American 1368. Let's look at his. He's on the LEETS 2. So all I'm going to do is type .LEETZ2. It's going to tell the American 1368 radar contact, climb via the LEETS 2 departure, follow all altitude and speed restrictions as published. Let's say I wanted to do the variation of it. I want them to delete speed restrictions. So I'm going to type .LEETZ2D, D for delete. Radar contact, climb via the leads to departure, delete speed restriction. Follow all altitude restrictions. One that's a little bit different is the Severe 1, which is rarely ever used out of Salt Lake. This one needs the temp. Temp is the temporary altitude assigned for the aircraft. I see a lot of people who do a lot of right-clicking to assign temporary altitudes, cruising altitudes, edit flight plan and stuff. You should know that the F keys are very useful in this instance. For example, if I wanted to look at 3778, all I have to do in the command line is type 778, aircraft select key, he's now highlighted. F6, aircraft select key, I now see his flight plan. If I wanted to assign a temporary altitude, I hit F8, which automatically does the .qq command, and then I give the 3-character representation of an altitude. These altitudes are represented kind of like flight levels in hundreds of thousands of feet. So 5,500 would be 055. 17,500 feet would be 175. Alright, so let's say 100 is 10,000 feet, which is the standard initial altitude out of Salt Lake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign him that temporary altitude by hitting F8, 100, then the aircraft select key. You can now see that with his data tag and tower view, you see his current altitude, which is 4,200 feet. Then it cycles to 100, which is the next altitude he is assigned, which is his temporary altitude. If I wanted to clear that, I would hit F8 and then aircraft select key. You can now see 4,200, then 390, which is his cruising altitude. So let's reassign him temporary altitude, F8, 100, aircraft select key. Let's look back at the alias. It tells him to maintain and then whatever his temporary altitude is assigned. Sorry, didn't mean to erase that. Alright, the Severe 1 radar contact alias command assumes that the pilot has already turned left and has blown through the Wasatch 193 radial southbound. And now that aircraft needs to be vectored to the left, southbound, to intercept that Wasatch 193, then proceed direct to Edith. So, we're going to assume that this pilot, Eagle Flight 3778, has filed the Severe 1 with the Coaldale transition. Okay, so he's airborne, he's already passed the Wasatch 193 radial to the west. We're going to type Severe 1. That's all we need to type. There's no speed restrictions on here due to the fact that it's non-RNAV. It tells Eagle Flight 3778 radar contact climb maintain 10,000, which is the temporary altitude we assigned him. Turn left heading 180, intercept the Wasatch 193 radial outbound, direct Edith when able, resume Severe 1 departure. From that point, the radar controller may choose to go ahead and delete the temporary altitude. F8 aircraft select key. You can now see his desired cruising altitude is flight level 390. Alright, moving on to approach. Probably going to be one of the most used alias file commands used for approach control is going to be the PTAC command. Alright, as we can see, the basic PTAC allows us to say PTAC and create a space afterwards. Let's say euphemy again is going to be our PTAC waypoint. It's going to give the distance from euphemy. It's going to say miles from. It's going to take that same waypoint you put in the first place and put it in here now. It's going to uppercase it. So it's going to say euphemy right here in all uppercase. Turn. You're going to put right or left in this spot. Then you're going to give them a heading. Let's say 140. Maintain whatever the temporary altitude is that you have currently assigned to that pilot, which it's always a good idea to assign text pilots temporary altitudes when working with this alias command. When needed, I always assume that you have put a temporary altitude where you want them to go down to or up to. Until established on the localizer, cleared ILS runway, then you list the runway number, 16 right, 16 left, approach. So let's do that one. Alright, PTAC space euphemy is our PTAC waypoint. Let's see, it says distance from euphemy, turn right heading 140, maintain. We still have we actually already cleared his temporary tag, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that out. I'm going to go ahead and assign 8,000, which is 080, as its temporary altitude. Make sure that's good. Yep, it is right there, 8,000. I'm going to paste that back. So it's going to maintain 8,000 until established on the localizer. Cleared ILS approach runway 16 right. And then it writes it all out for you. Eagle Flight 3778, 16 miles from Euphemy. Turn right heading 140. Maintain 8,000 until established on the localizer. Cleared ILS runway 16 right approach. Done. As you can see with some other variations, I've added a PTAC L. L would already tell the pilot to turn left. You don't have to write that in. That's one less thing you have to write. So the very next thing you give is just a heading. Same thing with PTAC R, which is turn right. I have a PTAC LD for descend and maintain. Say that he's at 9,000 and you want him to go to 8,000. You can give him a turn left, turn right, then descend, maintain, whatever you have in his temporary altitude until established on the localizer. A few different variations. As you can see, we have VOR DME approaches, no procedure turn, with procedure turn, VOR approaches like VOR Alpha, VOR Bravos. Same thing with these, procedure turn and no procedure turn. RNAV GPS, RNP runway approaches, DME arcs, and visual approaches. The visual approaches, quite interesting. Once they're established on the localizer, which by the way you should go ahead and turn and have them intercept the runway localizer if one is available. Once they established on the localizer, run the report field in sight command, and then it will say the airport is at your, let's say, 12 o'clock. It'll give a distance for their arrival airport that they filed, which hopefully is the arrival airport that they're landing at right now. It'll tell them miles, and then tell them to report in sight. Once they report in sight, give the CVA runway approach. Cleared visual runway, say 16 right, approach. You can also start a chain visual approach. You could have them report a traffic that is established on the localizer and already got the field in sight and been cleared for the visual approach. You can have them report that traffic and then follow that traffic, then cleared visual approach. There's a few keystrokes such as arrivals and SIDS where it'll draw all the waypoints for, say, the Quinn 3 arrival. A few other things that tower and approach might find useful is the runway localizer fixes for south ops and then north ops, and a few other things such as that. I have a center section. Center section is pretty small. All that you have is descents into Salt Lake, which for example the Bear 4, N for north ops, and C because you're a center controller. It'll tell that pilot to descend at pilot's discretion, to cross Bear at 17,000, give the altimeter of the arriving airport, which hopefully is Salt Lake, and Salt Lake City currently landing north. That's all the information they need. You also have a variation for south here. And you have that for each and every one, and I give the specific speeds and altitudes for the crossing waypoint as needed. You also have the handoffs to Unicom. So for example, Denver is not online, leaving my airspace, frequency change approved, radar services, and all that good stuff. After that, you have a miscellaneous section. This miscellaneous section is for all controllers. Take a look at it. It's very useful. You might need to use some of these every now and then. And one of my favorite things, show diagrams instead of having to, for instance, let's say the Salt Lake class Bravo airspace. We wanted to draw the Salt Lake class Bravo. We're going to go to view diagrams, and we're going to search all through the SID side here. There it is. KSLC class B. If I highlight that, as you can see, it draws a Salt Lake class Bravo. But that kind of took a lot for me to get to this diagram page, search all these different diagrams, and find out what I wanted. So what I did here is I took the built-in command .fd, which stands for find diagram, and then it says, for example, KSLC Edith 1. Let's scroll down here to airspace, and we'll find, for example, the show SLC B. The find diagram command would be KSLC space class space B, and normally you would have to type the FD and that exactly. So what I did is I said, let's make it simple, dot show SLC B, and what it'll do is actually do that command for us. So let's go back. It doesn't matter if you have an aircraft selected or not, just do show or dot show SLC B, then hit enter, and then it shows it. If you wanted to get rid of it, just type it again and it's gone. That could be used for many things. Show Edith 1, as in the Edith 1 departure, and there you can see the Edith 1 departure being drawn. To get rid of it, just type it again. You want to see the Nordic 3 arrival. Show Nordic 3, and it shows the Nordic 3 arrival, all its hold points and everything. Type it again, get rid of it. Look at the entire Salt Lake RTEC, type dot holds, and it shows all the holds within the Salt Lake City International area. Doesn't exactly show the waypoints, but if you know what you're looking for, you pretty much got a good idea of what's going on. Type dot holds again to get rid of it, and you're good to go. Alright, there's quite a few other miscellaneous FYIs here that you're able to look at, and I hope you find this to be useful. Go ahead and give me an email at kyle.sanders@zlcartech.com if you have any questions regarding this video, the alias file, or anything of the sort. I'll see you on the scopes.